Anyone know about the greatest coincidence in our history since we're all involved in technology and supply chain? What is the greatest coincidence that happened? If I mention the date, April the 3rd, 1973, of course that rings bells, right? April 3rd, 1973 was the first scan of a GS1 barcode in the US. What else happened on the same date? The first cell phone call. So since April the 3rd, 1973, these two technologies have been converging and converging and converging. I just thought I'd share that with you. I think that's important. Anyone from the Netherlands here? Geweldig, geweldig. Ik heb in Nederland gewoond voor 10 jaar. What I just said is I lived in Holland for 10 years. But when I came here first, it was building high-performance supply chains. And Bob reminded me this morning when he was talking about setting up 3Com in 1979. So from the Netherlands, what I want you to hear from this is that we had leadership back then. So when I came out of the military in Ireland and I came over here to the Netherlands in 84, 85, in the late 80s, I was with Digital Equipment Corporation. And I had this role to manage the supply chains in our networking business. And at that time, Digital, our DEC invented networking. So my job was to go with 2 French product managers to California to meet with small companies, startup companies. 3Com was one of them. And we had to bring those and integrate those into our supply chains. So I talked with 3Com, Cabletron, Shipcom, Wellfleet, Synoptics, and another small company that was a startup called Cisco. If I knew how to spell stock, I would not be here today. My job was to teach these companies about supply chains, about part numbering, about product lifecycle management, and we implemented the first networks in Europe. We put the first networks ever into Italy. We got paid in lira through France. We put Cabletron products into the Kremlin, and allegedly, we got paid in white stallions and vodka through the Middle East. I can't remember all the details, but that was really exciting times way back then. So I need the clicker to move on here. So for 10 years in the Netherlands, then I was building high-performance supply chains and doing some really cool stuff. And also in the Netherlands, you can take this as a compliment. We developed the first ever electronic ordering catalog where we ordered and we placed the first orders on Cisco equipment, all from the Netherlands here. So geweldig gedaan. So, okay, moving on. Lorette was supposed to be here. She's my boss at McGill. Lorette is amazing, absolutely amazing. So she has this convergence innovation theory where we put the human out in front. And that human is what we move towards. We don't take the shiny technology, but we look at that human in the future, and we look at their different roles in society. It's an employee, it's a parent, it's whatever. It's an athlete, many different roles. And then we look back and say, how do we need to prepare for that future? So she's amazing. She actually has parked herself in Amsterdam for the last 4 months, and she's here until November. So she should have been here. She may be here later in the afternoon. So the topics I'll introduce and discuss very much from the industry perspective. Some of this will be French or Dutch for those of you who are hearing something like this for the first time, because I'm giving some industry/academic perspectives, and you guys are the brilliant technologists that need to be able to fill in the gaps. So I'll show one slide on supply chain integrity or food chain integrity, and I'll leave that with you. I'll talk about supply chain resilience. I guarantee you've never heard of this stuff before. When I start putting it in context, you'll understand it, but you've probably never heard some of the wording that I'll be using, and it'll be an introduction. I'll talk about trust. I'll talk about the Edelman Trust Barometer, and I'll tell you why what Origin Trail is doing right now is critically important, and how they're well prepared with GS1 and other organizations to drive innovation in society. And I'll talk about digital transformation. Again, not telling you stuff that you don't know, but giving you maybe some frameworks that you can use. So, a good friend of mine, Professor Louise Manning, came up with this. You remember the horse meat scandal? So post-horse meat scandal, academics started developing the notions around supply chain integrity, food chain integrity. This is based on 4 pillars. Now, you see the pillars on the left. Process integrity, right? That makes sense. Product integrity, so is the product what it should be. data integrity, and the fourth one that's added here is people integrity. And as Phil was talking about verifiable credentials, this is a critical part that's not included in many, many conversations. But if you want to look at what these include, you can see some of the dynamics. I won't go through all of these in detail, but think of these four pillars as you're building solutions because they're all equally important. If you miss one of those, especially the people integrity side, we'll fail. We'll fail. So supply chain resilience, I want to go through this, and this is not to insult you, but this, if I had an audience here that were not technology savvy, I'd say, let me explain how all of these pieces work together. And I would say to them, imagine you're driving your car. You're going from Amsterdam to Brussels, and you have a GPS. And you program in the information into your GPS, very much like in a supply chain if you're using AI or machine learning. Then you have inside your car, you have all of these sensors, right? It tells you your speed, how much fuel you have, temperature of your engine, and so on. Think of that in context of supply chain like IoT devices, the sensors giving you information in real time. And then we have blockchain. Now, blockchain people don't like me saying this, but I say it with love. Blockchain is like looking in the rearview mirror at what happened, because it's a ledger of transactions, right? But I put this picture in on purpose because there's a potential obstacle in there, or potential hazard in there. So learning from the data that's captured in your transaction database can be vitally important looking forward. But what happens when magically your GPS says, there's an accident ahead, get off the highway? We call that a technology tripwire, and then a circuit breaker. The circuit breaker is get off the highway here. Okay? Now think about that in context of the next slide. Imagine a GPS scenario in your supply chain where event discovery is critical to recovery. Now, I hope this is not an eye chart for you, but I developed I wrote a paper on the left-hand side here. It's about the critical importance of system thinking and the cascading consequences of system failures. So in this model here, myself and Carl Eunice, we adopted a model from McDonald and Corsi where we looked at risk management, normal system performance in a business. This can be any company, it can be any industry, it can be any organization, it doesn't matter, any product. You have normal business, and then the shit hits the fan. Sorry for my language. But then something happens and you get into disruption management. And in disruption management, this part is critical. How critical can you recover? But you first have to be able to identify that something occurred, right? And then you try to fix the problem. You recover and you redesign. So here, what I'm arguing for, just like with a GPS going from Amsterdam to Brussels, we need to be able to figure out, you guys need to be able to figure out with your brilliance, how can we put in those technology tripwires that will advise us of something that could occur before it actually occurs, and then put in a circuit breaker. It may seem like it's simple to do. It's very difficult to do. But think of in the old days when I was coming up doing industrial engineering, you'd have tolerance levels on machines and stuff. You get charts, reports, IoT. This is why real-time information is so critically important. Let me give you examples of why this is important. I'll take you down here on the left-hand side, halfway down to D. If you look at D, it was a product quality issue. Did they have a plan in place for recovery? Yes. Did they use it? Partially. Did they rehearse it? Unknown. You have a plan and you don't test it? That's kind of silly, right? So in this case, it was unknown. But look here. It took weeks to discover, it took months to recover, and it cost $100 million. This is why I'm saying it's so critically important that you guys and your brilliance needs to come up with solutions for these technology tripwires, and also to give us a circuit breaker to be able to change what's happening and put us on a different path. This is why it's so important. Look at the next one down, product recall. Was there a plan? Yes. Was it used? No. Nope, sorry, we're not going to use that plan. Was it rehearsed? No. It was put in a drawer somewhere. And over here, it took weeks to discover, 6 months to recover, and it cost $50 to $60 million. This is why we need you. This is why we need origin trails, knowledge graphs, and this is why we need AI locked all up together to be able to do some fantastic stuff. Trust. Anyone ever hear of the Edelman Trust Barometer? This has been going on every year for about 22 years. I think I've actually managed to watch or to capture this for all 22 years. This is a global model. You see here on this one, fake news concerns. We heard about that this morning. We heard about it from Bob as well. Fake news is a serious concern globally. This represents at the bottom here all the different countries. And of course, there's no fake news in China. Governments and media fuel a cycle of distrust. Now, I want to share here with you, you'll hear about trust, mistrust, and distrust. Trust, we know, is accepting a vulnerability. So if you go to a restaurant, you're accepting the vulnerability that every single person in the supply chain worked on your behalf to make sure you get a wholesome, nutritious, and safe meal in front of you. Mistrust and distrust are often used interchangeably, but they're not. One is based on suspicion, and the other one is based on experience. So, for example, you might say, oh, that product is coming from Vietnam, I don't trust it. That would be bias, right? So we don't want to do that. But watch out for that mistrust and distrust and trust. They're different, but they're all very, very real. Societal leaders are not trusted. Any surprises there? Government on the left-hand side, journalists and CEOs. On the right-hand side, scientists are trusted. Any PhDs here? Couple? Yeah, I trust you. More are convinced that we're being lied to by societal leaders, journalists and reporters, my country's government leaders, business leaders. Government not seen as able to solve societal problems. Societal fears on the rise from whether it's job losses, climate change, hackers and cyber attacks and so on. So this cycle of distrust and societal stability is being threatened. But look at this model here. This is a model here on the vertical axis of ethical and unethical, competent and incompetent. So governments and media are seen as incompetent and unethical. Industry, origin trail, seen as competent and ethical. GS1, seen as competent and ethical. You see where this is going? So business and NGOs are seen as competent and effective drivers of positive change. And that positive change is also about innovation, driving innovation into society. We're perfectly positioned. Guess what? Information quality is the most powerful trust builder across institutions. What are we talking about today and tomorrow? Information quality, trusted data, verifiable credentials. You guys are perfectly positioned to solve some major challenges that governments cannot. By the way, this year, 2024, is it 64 countries have elections. I think it's 49% of the global population. So there's a lot of change going on. Digital transformation, I'll just fliz through this very quickly. There's two good friends of mine, two professors, Quiroz and Samuel Fasawamba, and they have this small little book. It's a tiny book, but there's a lot of good models in there. The caution here is if you only lead with technology as the first pin of the bowling alley strategy, you might fail. The success of digital transformation is at the intersection of technology, organizations, and people, where organizations need to evolve to digital business models, and you need to do the capacity building for the humans as well. This is a model I have. I won't go through too much, but it's safe to say that I created the 6D model to say that digital transformation, it's a journey. And that journey is never linear. It's not a destination per se, but on the left-hand side, speaking about GS1, the digitization, that first act of digitization, getting the data right is critical, and this is where GS1 standards are extraordinarily helpful. The second part, digitalization. Now, if you've used those words interchangeably before, there's no penalty points, it's okay. It's okay. But digitization is going from analog to digital, whereas the digitalization is the business process and role automation. We see too many blockchain projects starting at the digitalization, ending up with 90% of the effort is fixing the data. You have to fix the data at the start. When I spoke with Amazon e-commerce guy, they said 95% of their effort is fixing the data. And anyway, there's lots of conversations that need to occur. Do we disintermediate? How do we democratize the technology? And how do we datafy it? How do we learn from the data? In summary, what if we don't change at all and something magical will happen? I think there are still some organizations that are in that type of mode. But we don't have linear supply chains anymore. This notion that we pass products from A, B, C to D, that's not the world that we're in. We have numerous supply ecosystems that are interconnected but not always interoperable. A quick note, I did a lot of media interviews during COVID, and the media wanted to hear that we had supply chain issues, we had food security issues. And I said, we don't have food security issues, we have enough food, we just don't know where it is. So that's a food uncertainty issue, and that was a new term that I introduced into the dialogue. We had a food uncertainty issue because we didn't know where the freaking food was. So moving on, ecosystems and value chain mapping is key to understanding the supply chain and vulnerabilities. Trust acts as a social lubricant. Think about if trust was oxygen, we take it for granted, right? What if you take away the oxygen? Then everyone panics, right? So trust is absolutely critical. In times of crisis, trust acts as a social lubricant to move things forward and keeps things going. It's impossible to eliminate bad character, the human side. Remember, people, integrity, you got to figure out solutions for that. I'm hoping that you guys will. Technology, neutral industry standards enable interoperability. Think GS1. And end-to-end transparency is a growing requirement, not a nice to have. My final point, digital transformation, as I mentioned, is not an endpoint, it's a journey that you go on. So think of the 4 pillars of integrity, and there's questions and answers later where I'll be asking you questions. Thank you.